Hi, this is Jeff from the Ozark Mountains in Missouri, USA. Well, it looks like we got a bunch of stuff already torn apart on the bench here, and it has to do with this, the Sharp PCG 820 we looked at a couple weeks ago. Wasn't able to fix it in that video. Thought I might be able to find a junk pocket computer for the part I thought I needed. Didn't know I'd be able to get one so quick. I wound up with two actually in a set of kind of junky beat up ones. So in this video we're going to see what the difference is between the new one and the old one, and see if we can't get that old one, the 820 that is, see if we can't get that fixed up. So let's get started. Thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. They not only do PCBs and flex PCBs, they also have 3D printing service, injection molding service. They do CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication. They also have a thriving maker community where you can share projects and check out what other people are doing. For your next project, head on over to PCBWay. So here we have one of the two new units. They're pretty much identical, same model, both pretty beaten up. And this is the one we looked at previously. It's a PCG 820. Notice it says Scientific Calculations Basic CASL text editor. CASL is a teaching pseudo assembly language. You're not really programming the Z80 in assembly language. It's a teaching aid meant to get you familiar with programming assembly language without taking the chance of locking the computer up. Then on the PCG 830, look, the keyboard and everything is the same. What we do notice is it says assembler and C language. Again, the C language on here is actually interpreted, so you're not, it's not being assembled to or compiled to machine code. It's meant as a teaching language. And I haven't checked for the manual. This may have an actual Z80 assembler on it rather than CASL. I haven't looked into that yet. If we look at the business side, and yeah, there's parts falling off of these. Got to tilt this one here to get rid of the reflections. We can see these look pretty much identical. The blue tape is I put on the original one. I'm holding down a part I had taken off, which went right here. So these are the same circuit board, maybe a slightly different revision. This says N1094ECB2, and this says N1094ECC2. So this might be a later revision. It's got basically the same parts, same processor, same LCD driver. The 830 has 32K instead of 8K of RAM. It's got a different ROM. And it's got a few extra parts in the power supply here. Most notably, you can see it's got an extra electrolytic capacitor. And there's a couple other teeny tiny parts it's got, including one extra transistor there. But pretty much the same board. And you notice that we had speculated that part of this was chipped out before, and you can see what it looks like in the original. So I have tested both of these that I got in after prying out the crusty batteries that were in there and cleaning it up, and both work. I'm not going to take the processor that we need for the 820 out of this one, because this has this extra little handwritten note on it on paper, and I don't think these have been opened up before, because you notice this extra little sticker here that I pulled up. And if we look again at the I can't get to the 821 right now, but this is missing. This is a security anti-tamper type of thing. And I just had more stuff fall off of there. Okay, this is the one I want to use for parts, just because it doesn't have the sticker on the processor. Both work. And I want to show you what shape these were in. Busted parts. This plastic's all chipped up in here, and all three, all of this stuff in here was really chipped and broken, even though the 830s had never been opened, because that security tag was still in place. So we need to pull the good processor out here. So I have to remove the low voltage detect part right here. Pull the board out because we don't want to try to desolder on top of the rubber keypad membrane that's on the bottom. We'll use the hot air gun to pull the processor, and then we'll pop it in the 820 and see if that fixes it. Before tearing this G830 apart for parts, I wanted to show you that this one does indeed seem like it's acting right current-wise. Remember, we were drawing way too much current through the processor on the 820. This is in the off mode, and it is 0.006005 milliamps. We can turn it on. The on button does work, and it's about 6 milliamps in idle mode, which is fine. And I also noticed that if you go shift comma reset, there is a diagnostic mode here. This was listed in the G820 manual. Oh, I wiggled it and shut it off again. Shift comma and reset. This diagnostic mode is not on the 820. Let me see if I can increase the contrast there for you. That's a little better. You can do this aging check, and it goes through and checks the RAM and ROM, and continuous process. The lights up all the LCD pixels, things like that. So this one, indeed, other than being beat up, does seem to work fine. Now, since we've turned it on, let's take it apart. So we need to procure the processor from the donor board. The first thing I want to do is take a picture of the component alignment. Then I'm going to add some flux and solder to the IC. This helps warm up the area and makes it easier to desolder. Then I'm going to remove that electrolytic cap that's in the way, protect the area around it with some Cat-10 tape. That way we don't dislodge any of the small capacitors or resistors. And finally, we'll pull the chip loose with some hot air. Now that we have the chip, we need to clean it up. I'm going to clean off the excess solder with a soldering iron, and then take some alcohol with a toothbrush to it and clean up all the old nasty flux. This is the target board, the PCG220. I've already removed the processor, and now I'm going to clean up the pads. And I managed to snag two different pads by being careless, one with the desoldering braid and one with the Q-tip. The one pad was completely ripped off, the other one is just peeled up, so I'm going to try to glue it down with my overcoat pin. A piece of tape will hold that trace down while the glue dries. I got out the overhead magnifier for the soldering job on this one. It makes things so much easier. I can look at that big monitor and give my old eyes a break. Now we're going to check out that patch job for that lifted trace, and unfortunately that didn't work, so I scrape all the glue off. Half the pad breaks off. I'll have to fix that with a wire like the other one. The next thing I'm going to do is add some flux to all the pads, align the chip. I'll drag solder all the pins. I've got a special tip for that. You can use a small chisel tip. It's a fairly quick thing to do. Not much down pressure is needed. And then I'm going to use some 30 gauge wire wrap wire to fix where those torn pads are. Luckily, there's a couple of vias there that I can bend the wire and poke into the via, solder it at the via, form the wire up over the pin, cut the wire, and solder it on. It's very intricate, takes a long time to do, but it got the job done. Here is a quick look at the soldered on chip with the two wire bodges. It came out pretty good, I thought. The first test with the newly transplanted processor, and it does nothing but draw almost 10 milliamps, which is too much current. It's not doing anything. My heart kind of sank here. So rather than just being depressed about it, I decided to go back and check my work, since it's 99.9% chance that it's something I did. So I pulled the low voltage detect chip off to gain access to all sides of the processor again, soldered in a 10K resistor to pull that line up. Then I went and resoldered all the pins on the processor again, looked at them under magnification. I think there may have been a solder bridge in there, but anyhow, I touched it up, checked it twice, scraped with a fine probe between the pins to make sure there was no solder balls or anything in there. And lo and behold, it worked, and it's drawing the right amount of current. Happy days. Well, how about that? We got our PCG 820 working. We can turn it off and back on again. So it did turn out to be the processor. I have to admit, the first time that we tried to power it up and it was drawing a lot of current and nothing was coming up on the screen, my heart sank a little bit. But just being patient, going back through the work that was done, checking all the solder joints and everything, we got that resolved pretty quickly. Then went ahead and put the low voltage detect part back on there, glued the caps down, put it back together, works fine. And since it's drawing the right amount of current now, which is almost nothing when the power's off, the batteries will last a long time. I think between the two PCG 830s, we've got enough to make one fairly nice one. It's odd that both the cases yellowed like they did, because they're just about the same amount of yellow on the inside, especially the cover. So it makes me think they were probably stored someplace that was rather hot, rather than it being just sun exposure, because sun exposure wouldn't affect the inside of things. So I might do that. And this is the one that I didn't steal the processor from, because I had to label it. This is the one that has the nicer front case. So I'll find the nicest back case, that type of thing, put it together. And then we'll have a PCG 830 as well, which has the extra features. I decided not to swap out the 8K chip for a 32K chip on this guy. I will just leave it as it is. The boards are quite delicate, and what I should have done was use some Chip Quick, the low melting point solder on that processor. It would have made that job easier. Probably wouldn't have ripped up those two pads then. But you live and you learn. I actually bought some Chip Quick quite a while ago, but I've been hesitating to use it because it's kind of expensive, which is kind of silly. It's there to use. It makes the job easier. You don't damage the board, because these boards are, they're not a very expensive or robust substrate, and they're very, very thin, about 1 millimeter or so. So you need all the help you can get to do a successful repair. But anyhow, we got it. It was kind of fun finding out that all the detective work that we did in that first episode paid off, and it was indeed the processor, and just happened to luck out and find these two 830s to fix it with. Any questions or comments, let me know in that comment section down there below. Thanks to everyone who helped support the Hey Birt channel through Patreon and other means. It's greatly appreciated. And until next time, bye.